picture this for a second. You are standing in Dealey Plaza.
Okay.
You're in downtown Dallas, Texas. You are looking at this sloping grassy hill. You're looking at a concrete pergola. You are essentially standing on the site of the most violently scrutinized, like frame-by-frame analyzed 6 seconds in all of American history.
Right, the Kennedy assassination. Everyone knows that spot.
Exactly. But now, I want you to just teleport with me. Let's go 1,500 miles west to a totally quiet, smelling of hay elephant paddock at the Oakland Zoo, just on a brisk Tuesday in December.
That's quite a pivot.
I know, right? But here is the question for this deep dive. What does the site of President John F. Kennedy's assassination share with an absolutely mundane, everyday municipal zoo enclosure in California?
It sounds like a trick question, honestly.
It totally does. But the answer is that they're both invisible remnants of the exact same machine.
Yeah. And it's a profound shared lineage, really, and it's entirely hidden in plain sight. I mean, when we think of the ground we walk on or the parks we visit, we tend to just treat them as a given, like they've just always been there.
Right, just part of the background.
Exactly. But both that grassy knoll in Dallas and that elephant paddock in Oakland, they're surviving artifacts of a very specific, very desperate, and honestly highly calculated window of American history.
And that is exactly what we are exploring today. We are pulling from this massive research dossier compiled by Nick McKenzie, and we're looking at public agency records, archives from the Living New Deal, historical scholarship, all of it centered on the Works Progress Administration, the WPA.
The WPA, which is, one of those acronyms from history class that people vaguely remember but rarely actually understand.
Right. And our thesis for you listening right now is incredibly simple, but I think staggering in its implications. Every single American has used a WPA project.
Unquestioned.
Our mission for this deep dive isn't to marvel at, massive, famous federal monuments in Washington, D.C. We want to walk the everyday backbone of this country. We want to prove that the WPA built the very civic landscape that you live inside without you ever even noticing.
Because we really are talking about a hidden geography here. I mean, history is usually taught as this sequence of events, right? Like, what happened, who did it, who won the war.
Dates and names.
Yeah, dates and names. We rarely talk about the physical stage upon which that history actually occurred. And what this dossier proves, mathematically and physically, is that the stage itself, the sidewalks, the local schools, the neighborhood zoos, the municipal plazas, it was largely manufactured by hand during this one specific era.
So how do you actually build a civic nervous system from scratch?
Yeah.
Let's anchor ourselves in the year 1935. The Great Depression isn't just a headline anymore. It is this localized apocalypse for literally every town in America.
Oh, absolutely. It's devastating.
But let's get into the mechanics of that. Because it's easy to just wave a hand and say, oh, the economy was bad. But what did that actually mean for a city manager or a town council? Why couldn't a town just build their own schools or parks themselves?
To understand the sheer paralysis of 1935, you really have to look at the mechanics of municipal finance. Because towns and cities, they survive on property taxes.
Right.
And when you have a massive economic collapse, unemployment skyrockets, and people simply cannot pay their property taxes. I mean, they're just trying to feed their kids. So the tax delinquency rates in the early 1930s were catastrophic.
Off the charts.
Off the charts. And when a city's tax revenue just evaporates, they inevitably default on their municipal bonds.
Okay, and when that happens?
A bond market completely freezes. Nobody's going to lend that city money. So if you are a local government, you suddenly have absolutely zero access to capital. None. You have no money to fix the roads, no money to expand a crowded hospital, certainly no money to build a new high school. And worse than all of that, you have thousands of desperate, unemployed citizens sleeping on the steps of City Hall begging for work.
So the civic wallet wasn't just empty. It was seized entirely.
Exactly. It was a total municipal lockdown.
So this is where the federal government steps in. Enter the WPA and its administrator, Harry Hopkins. Now, Hopkins is such a fascinating figure to me because he wasn't just some standard bureaucrat. He was actually a social worker.
Yes, a very passionate one.
And he had this ironclad, almost religious philosophy about relief, right? He fundamentally believed in the psychology of work.
He did. Hopkins was vehemently opposed to what was then called the dole.
Which is just handing out cash.
Right, just giving direct cash payments to the unemployed. He argued that the psychic cost of idleness, just sitting around feeling useless, was just as dangerous to the American fabric as the physical hunger itself.
Oh, wow. So he saw unemployment as this kind of psychological rot.
Exactly. He believed that simply giving a man a check was degrading. It eroded self-reliance. It eroded dignity. He wanted people to work for their survival, to feel that they were contributing something tangible to their own communities.
But he didn't just want them, digging holes and filling them back in. This wasn't supposed to be meaningless busy work.
No, absolutely not. The labor had to be visible. It had to be inherently useful to the community. And crucially, and this is a big point, it had to be mathematically engineered to be labor intensive.
Okay, wait, explain that. Engineered to be labor intensive.
Yeah, so this is the defining economic mechanism of the WPA. Their entire goal was to maximize the number of human beings receiving a paycheck.
Okay?
So imagine an engineering problem presents two solutions. One solution requires this massive, expensive, gas-powered bulldozer that needs a single operator.
Right.
And the other solution requires 50 men with shovels and pickaxes. The WPA philosophy dictated that you hire the 50 men.
Wow. Even if it was slower.
Even if it was slower. They deliberately avoided heavy machinery whenever they possibly could. The mandate was to employ the needy directly, utilizing their physical labor to absorb the vast pools of unemployment wherever those people lived.
That makes sense in theory, right? Like, employ as many people as possible. But how does that actually work logistically? How does a federal administrator sitting at a wooden desk in Washington, D.C. know that a specific neighborhood in Ohio needs a new storm drain?
They don't.
Or that a zoo in Oakland needs an elephant paddock? Like, they didn't have localized data models. They didn't have algorithms or satellite mapping to survey infrastructure decay back then.
No, they didn't need any of that because the mechanism worked in reverse.
What do you mean?
This is the historical concept of the cooperative undertaking. This is so important to understand. The federal government absolutely did not swoop into a town and dictate what was going to be built.
Oh, really? I always assumed it was this massive top-down federal mandate. Like Washington pointing at a map and saying, build a school here.
No, not at all. That would have required an impossibly massive federal planning bureaucracy. Instead, local city and county governments acted as the sponsors.
What?
So the locality, the town itself, would look at their own needs. They would supply the land, they would drop the blueprints, and they would provide a share of the cost. Usually they did that by supplying the physical materials like the cement, the lumber, or the steel.
Wow.
And then the WPA, representing the federal government, supplied the muscle. They paid the wages of the laborers.
Okay, so it's essentially like a nationwide municipal version of Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like if you are a town, you provide the empty lot and you provide the architectural vision for what the house should look like. And then the federal government rolls up in a convoy of trucks and says, here is the workforce. We have the carpenters, the diggers, the masons. We'll build your house.
That analogy is spot on. And the result of that cooperative undertaking is the reason the WPA's legacy feels so organic to the American landscape today. Because local neighborhoods were steering the requests, the WPA projects didn't look like these generic, one-size-fits-all federal stamps dropped from the sky,
Right, they weren't just brutalist concrete blocks everywhere.
Exactly. They bore the unique fingerprints of their own communities. They were built using local stone. They matched regional architectural styles. They fulfilled hyper-specific local desires.
But wait, if a town like Oakland, say, already owned the land and they already had the blueprints drawn up by their own local architects, why involve Washington at all? Why not just hire the local unemployed guys themselves?
Because of that municipal finance collapse we just discussed.
Oh, right. The frozen bond market.
Yes. Those blueprints were literally gathering dust in City Hall basements. A city might have acquired a piece of swampy land a decade earlier, and they might have paid a landscape architect to sketch out a beautiful park way back in 1928 before the crash. But in 1935, they couldn't afford to pay a single worker a daily wage to actually build the thing.
They were totally broke.
Completely. The local governments had the ambition, they had the geographical knowledge, and they had the plans. But they lacked the liquid capital to execute. The WPA was the federal engine that suddenly animated all of those dormant local dreams.
So the local governments are basically flipping through their long-forgotten wish lists, pointing at things they've wanted for years, and the WPA is just saying, yes, provide the cement and we will provide the men.
Exactly.
And because it was driven entirely by these local wish lists, the WPA didn't just build intimidating federal mega projects. They built whatever the town asked for, no matter how remarkably small or honestly quirky it was. Which brings us perfectly back to the Oakland Zoo. Let's look at exactly how microscopic this federal intervention could get.
The Oakland case study is a perfect microcosm of this whole dynamic.
Just to set the historical stage here, in 1935, the Oakland Zoo wasn't actually located where it is today. It was situated up in the hills in what was the Sequoia Park and Joaquin Miller Park area. And we have the exact granular details from the dossier, and they are just fascinating. The WPA allocated exactly $4,791 to enlarge the elephant paddock.
It is an incredibly specific, hyper-local allocation of federal resources.
Right, $4,791. And then the following year, in 1936, they allocated a further $17,940 for zoo landscaping. And just for thoroughness, I should note from the dossier that the zoo eventually relocated to its present site, which was Durant Park today, known as Nolan Park, in 1939. But I really want to stick to that first number.
The elephant paddock.
$4,791 to make a municipal elephant paddock a little bit bigger.
What is so compelling about that tiny dollar amount is what it represents mathematically in 1935. That $4,791 wasn't going to a massive contracting firm that was going to take a huge cut of the profit.
Right.
The vast majority of that money was going directly into the pockets of the men, mixing the concrete, digging the post holes, and welding the fencing. It demonstrates the WPA's defining trait, which is its microscopic reach. You have a massive federal relief agency tasked with combating a national economic crisis of unprecedented proportions. And they are micromanaging the fence line of an elephant enclosure.
It is honestly bizarre by modern standards. Like, just imagine the federal government stepping in today to fix a single neighborhood dog park or, I don't know, put a new roof on a local petting zoo. You'd have 6 congressional hearings before anyone even bought a bag of cement.
Oh, it'd be a media circus today.
It sounds like a punchline. But in 1935, it was standard operating procedure.
It really speaks to an intimacy between the federal government and daily neighborhood life that simply does not exist anymore. The WPA was entirely willing to fund tiny, hyper-specific betterments to civic amenities. Because remember, their primary metric of success was employment.
Right, getting paychecks to people.
Exactly. If enlarging that paddock took a crew of 10 men a month of hard physical labor, then it was a highly successful WPA project. Because it kept those 10 men fed, it injected their wages directly into the local grocery stores and businesses, and as a byproduct, it gave the citizens of Oakland a slightly nicer Sunday afternoon at the zoo.
It's the ultimate micro-investment. But the real twist here, and this is what blew my mind in the dossier, is that just because the WPA was willing to do this microscopic, almost invisible neighborhood work, it didn't mean they abandoned large-scale ambition.
No, not at all.
Because while one WPA crew was over there expanding an elephant paddock for a few $1,000s, another WPA crew was working in the exact same park on something entirely different.
Which brings us to the colossal side of the Oakland case study, the Woodminster Amphitheater and Cascade.
So you walk away from the elephants, you stroll through Joaquin Miller Park between 1935 and 1940, and you encounter an absolute marvel of municipal engineering.
Colossal for a city, certainly. I mean, the Woodminster Amphitheater is a massive outdoor performance space, and attached to it is this grand stepped water cascade. It is a gorgeous, monumental piece of landscape architecture and public art. And the initial WPA funding for this project was over $128,000.
That is a staggering difference in scale from the $4,000 elephant fence.
It is.
And the dossier notes that both the zoo paddock and this massive amphitheater were part of a roughly $1 million WPA program spread across the city of Oakland alone.
This contrast, between the paddock and the amphitheater, it's crucial for understanding the unique signature of the WPA. Because during the New Deal, there were multiple federal agencies, and they often had very different operational philosophies.
Like who?
Well, take the PWA, the Public Works Administration, which was run by Harold Ikes. The PWA financed colossal contractor-built mega projects. They didn't do the micro stuff. They hired private contractors who brought in heavy machinery to build things like the Lincoln Tunnel or the Triborough Bridge or these massive hydroelectric dams.
So the PWA is heavy engineering, private contractors, big machines.
Right. And then, on the other hand, you had the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, they were mostly young men sent out into the rural wilderness. They were planting millions of trees, cutting fire breaks, building hiking trails and cabins in national parks, very rural.
Got it.
But the WPA's signature was its complete lack of a characteristic scale. Its defining trait was its operational range.
So they did everything.
Everything. On the exact same day, in the exact same city, the WPA could be building a massive, majestic amphitheater with hundreds of laborers hauling stone and pouring thousands of cubic yards of concrete. And a few miles away, a crew of 3 guys could be pouring a single block of concrete sidewalk. They operated at every size simultaneously.
It's like a construction company that simultaneously builds a massive municipal stadium, and then, on their lunch break, they drive over to your house to fix a pothole in your driveway.
Exactly.
You just don't see that kind of operational elasticity. Usually an organization specializes, right? You're either the big infrastructure guys or you're the local handyman. The WPA was both, everywhere, all at once.
And again, this elasticity wasn't an accident. It was the direct mechanical result of that cooperative undertaking model we talked about.
Because the towns were asking for both.
Yes, because they were simply answering the requests of the local governments, and local governments inherently need both massive amphitheaters and small sidewalks. So the WPA's portfolio became this perfect mirror of what a functioning civic society actually requires.
So if we take that $1 million ecosystem in Oakland, the amphitheater, the zoo, the sidewalks, the retaining walls, and we multiply that across every single county in America, you get an astronomical accumulation of everyday infrastructure.
You really do.
Which brings us to the numbers. Let's look at the actual arithmetic of this civic backbone.
The national data drop for the WPA, spanning from its inception in 1935 to its liquidation in 1943, is frankly difficult to comprehend.
The numbers in this dossier are wild. I'm just going to read some of these off. Over 8 years, the WPA constructed or improved roughly 125,000 public buildings.
Incredible.
They built more than 4,000 completely new schools, and they repaired or expanded tens of thousands more. They built 130 hospitals. They scattered hundreds of swimming pools, parks, courthouses, libraries, fire stations, and post offices across nearly every county in the country.
It's almost hard to picture that much construction.
It is. And then there is this one, which really stood out to me. They laid down 9,000 miles of storm drains and sewers.
Let's stop and analyze the physical reality of that last number for a second. 9,000 miles of sanitary infrastructure.
Right.
This is where we transition from looking at things you drive over or things you go to visit to the civic landscape you literally live inside.
What do you mean by that?
Well, digging sewers is not glamorous work. No one is cutting a ribbon and taking a press photograph of a storm drain.
Right. There's no brass plaque on a sewer pipe down in the mud.
Exactly. But I want to talk about how they did this.
Yeah, because you said earlier they avoided heavy machinery to maximize employment. Does that mean they were digging 9,000 miles of sewer trench primarily by hand?
In many, many cases, yes. The sheer physical toll of this labor is just hard to overstate. You have crews of men, and remember, many of these men were formerly accountants or clerks or factory workers before the market crash.
They weren't all seasoned construction workers.
Not at all. And now they are down in trenches with pickaxes and shovels. They are manually breaking ground. They're installing heavy timber shoring to prevent the trench walls from collapsing in on them. They're lowering heavy clay or concrete pipes by hand, sealing the joints, and then manually backfilling the dirt. It is grueling, back-breaking work.
It's incredible to think about the physical exertion required to lay 9,000 miles of pipe that way. I mean, that's further than New York to Los Angeles and back, by hand.
And yet, that unseen, manually constructed infrastructure literally made mid-century municipal life possible. You cannot have post-war urban growth, you cannot have modern housing developments, and you absolutely cannot have public health without modern sanitary engineering beneath the streets.
Right.
By laying those 9,000 miles of sewers and drains, the WPA fundamentally sanitized and modernized the American town. They built the invisible foundation that everything else rests upon.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, for a second. Have you used one? That is the driving question of this deep dive. Have you used a WPA project? I want you to just picture the oldest public school in your town.
Yeah, everyone knows the one.
The one with the slightly Art Deco brickwork above the heavy wooden doors. Picture the municipal swimming pool you went to as a kid, the one with the thick concrete bleachers. Think about the local post office where you go to mail your taxes, or just the storm drains that keep your specific street from flooding when it rains.
It's everywhere.
When you look at the math, 125,000 public buildings, 4,000 schools. The statistical odds that you have never stepped foot in, driven past, or structurally relied upon a WPA project are vanishingly small. You are living in their house.
It is the ultimate invisible dividend, and it's invisible precisely because it is so
So
ubiquitous.
it's everywhere.
Right. When a piece of infrastructure is everywhere, when it just works day in and day out, it becomes background noise. You stop asking where it came from.
Now, look at this caveat in the dossier, though.
Yeah.
It notes that these headline totals, the 125,000 buildings, the 4,000 schools, they are approximations. They are drawn from the WPA's own self-reporting at the time.
Sure.
And it admits that sometimes the line between built from scratch and heavily repaired gets a little fuzzy in the historical record. Like if it turns out they only built 3,800 brand new schools instead of exactly 4,000, does that actually change the legacy? Like, does a slightly fuzzy spreadsheet diminish what they did?
It's a valid bureaucratic question, sure, but historically, the answer is a resounding no. The exactness of the spreadsheet matters far less than the inescapable physical reality of the structures themselves.
How so?
Well, whether it's 3,800 or 4,100, we are talking about an order of magnitude that fundamentally altered the built environment of a continent. Think about it from the perspective of a local community in, say, 1937.
Yep.
If a local government sponsored a project to take a crumbling, unsafe, drafty 19th century schoolhouse and the WPA sent a crew to gut it, reinforce the foundation, build an entirely new wing, and add indoor plumbing for that community, that is a new school.
Right, it feels brand new to the kids going there.
Exactly. The bureaucratic classification of repair versus new construction just fades away when a generation of children are suddenly sitting in warm, structurally sound, well-lit classrooms. The ubiquitous physical reality is the truth of the WPA.
That makes perfect sense. It's the physical dividend, not the paperwork, that matters. And because this civic backbone is everywhere, and because it largely consists of incredibly unglamorous things like sewers, retaining walls, elementary schools, it just disappeared into the background of just how things are.
It became the scenery.
Right. But here's where we pivot. Because sometimes the WPA built something that was absolutely meant to be seen, something grand, something designed to be a prominent focal point for a major city. And yet, we still ignore its origins.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of the dossier.
It really is. Which leads us back to Dallas, Texas, where the WPA built a front door so grand that a national tragedy completely erased its origins.
We are returning to Dealey Plaza.
We mentioned it at the top of the show, but now we really need to dig into the geography, the engineering, and the true history of this place. We're in downtown Dallas. You have Main Street, Elm Street, and Commerce Street.
Right.
And they all funnel together, sloping down to pass underneath a railroad bridge. This is the famous triple underpass.
And it is crucial to understand what Dealey Plaza was originally engineered to be, because completed in 1940, this was a massive, highly complex, cooperative project. It was a joint effort between three entities: the City of Dallas, the Texas Highway Department, and the Works Progress Administration.
Okay.
The WPA provided the massive, sustained labor force required to execute this grand vision.
And it was a grand vision. It wasn't just pouring some flat concrete to fix a traffic bottleneck. The landscaping and the architectural structures were designed by a prominent Kansas City landscape architecture firm called Hare and Hare.
Yes.
Why was a triple underpass such a major engineering feat for Dallas in 1940, though? Like, why did they need it so badly?
Because prior to this, that specific area was a chaotic, dangerous jumble of grade-level railroad crossings. They were blocking the main arteries into the city, so you'd have traffic backed up for blocks, ambulances stuck waiting for trains to pass. It was an urban planning nightmare.
Wow.
The triple underpass fundamentally solved that nightmare by sinking the roadways beneath the tracks. But Hare didn't just want a functional concrete trench, They designed a stunning civic space.
Right, they made it beautiful.
They incorporated beautiful Art Deco peristyles, elegant pergolas, and reflecting pools on the slopes. The city named it after George B. Dealey, who was the publisher of the Dallas Morning News and a major civic booster. The entire purpose of this plaza was to serve as a grand ceremonial civic gateway.
A front door for the city.
Exactly. When travelers arrived in Dallas, this was supposed to be the green, ordered, architecturally beautiful front door that welcomed them into the modern Texas metropolis. It was a massive statement of civic pride, subsidized and built by WPA labor.
So for 23 years, from 1940 to 1963, Dealey Plaza functions exactly as intended. It's a handsome, functioning piece of municipal landscape. People drive under the underpass on their way to work. They eat lunch on the grassy slopes by the reflecting pools. It is a total municipal success story.
A beautiful park.
But then comes the tragic pivot.
Yeah.
November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy's motorcade rolls down Elm Street, heading toward that WPA-built triple underpass. The shots are fired. And in a matter of 6 seconds, the identity of this location is permanently, violently altered. Is completely frozen in time.
It ceases to be a park and instantly becomes a trauma site.
Right.
And what is so profound about Dealey Plaza, especially in the context of our discussion about the WPA, is the absolute irony of its legacy today. As we established earlier, Dealey Plaza is arguably the most scrutinized, filmed, and argued over patch of ground in modern history.
Oh, without doubt.
You have federal researchers, historians, acoustic experts, conspiracy theorists. They have spent decades studying the exact topographical slope of the grassy knoll. They have analyzed the concrete pillars of the pergola frame by frame on the Zapruder film. They know the distance from the book depository to the street down to the millimeter.
And yet, in thousands of official investigations, in countless documentaries, deep dive books, and guided historical tours, Dealey Plaza is almost never identified as a New Deal WPA project.
It is genuinely astonishing. People are obsessively studying the physical environment, completely blind to how the physical environment actually got there. The ground is invisible even when it is literally the most famous ground in the world.
It's like a brilliant character actor who has been working in theater for 20 years, right? They have all this incredible training, this deep, rich origin story.
Right.
And then they get cast in one shocking, highly publicized, violent movie role, and they get completely typecast. Everyone forgets their entire history. They just become that guy from that one scene.
Yeah.
History happened on top of Dealey Plaza so loudly and so violently that it entirely deafened us to the history of the ground itself.
That is a perfect way to frame it. History erased the ground it stands on. We see the heroic event, we dissect the event, but we do not see the stage. And Dealey Plaza is the ultimate, undeniable proof of the thesis of this dossier.
How so?
The WPA's work is so deeply structurally woven into ordinary American ground, so fundamental to the landscape, that we can literally stare right at it for 60 years, magnifying it, obsessing over it, and never see it for what it actually is.
That is just... It gives you chills when you think about it like that. Let's pull all of this together because we've covered so much ground today. We've gone from the microscopic management of an elephant paddock in Oakland, $4,791 for a fence, to the colossal engineering of a massive amphitheater in the very same park.
A full spectrum.
We've talked about the grueling physical mechanics of laying 9,000 miles of sewers by hand and the construction of 4,000 schools. And we've looked at how even the most famous, obsessively studied public plaza in America hides its WPA origins in plain sight. What is the final synthesis here? What does this all mean for the listener today?
The synthesis is what the dossier beautifully terms the infinite dividend.
The infinite dividend. I like that.
Yeah. The WPA didn't just give the country a few famous, isolated monuments to stare at behind velvet ropes. By balancing colossal municipal infrastructure alongside microscopic, hyperlocal community projects, they built a permanent national civic nervous system.
And they did it by asking the towns what they actually wanted.
Exactly. They partnered directly with the neighborhoods, they asked the towns what they needed, what their dormant dreams were, and then they supplied the manual muscle to build it. It was an investment so broad, so deep, and so intricately rooted in the everyday lives of citizens that 90 years later, it still fundamentally dictates how a typical American town functions.
It's the dividend you live inside.
Yeah.
So I want to say this directly to you listening right now. Look around. You are probably sitting in, driving past, or fundamentally relying on one of these projects right this very second.
Almost certainly.
If you drank a glass of clean tap water today, if you dropped a letter in a sturdy stone mailbox, if you drove past a public school with Art Deco lettering, you are coasting on the labor of someone who was desperate for work in 1935, who picked up a shovel, and who built the future by hand.
And if we extrapolate that into the present day, it leaves us with a rather provocative, perhaps even unsettling concept to mull over.
What's that?
Well, we have clearly established that modern America is currently coasting on a 90-year-old, largely invisible infrastructure, an everyday backbone that was built manually during an unprecedented economic collapse. But the 9,000 miles of sewers, the 125,000 public buildings, they are not immortal.
No. Concrete cracks.
Clay pipes rust and collapse, foundations settle, schools age out.
They're slowly, inevitably crumbling beneath our feet.
Exactly. So if this invisible civic nervous system finally ages out and fails, What happens next?
That's the terrifying question.
Can modern America summon the kind of neighborhood cooperation, the shared civic vision, and the sheer political will required to rebuild our front doors and our everyday backbones? Or does it take a total economic catastrophe, a massive systemic shock, to make us finally invest again in the ground we stand on?
Wow. That is something to think about. Next time you're having an ordinary day, maybe walking past an elephant enclosure at the zoo or driving under an old stone bridge, look down at the ground, look at the concrete. It's not just background noise, it's the blueprint of how we survived. And it might just be the blueprint of what we have to do next.